Newsbreak, brought to you by National Mutual Financial Services.
Good evening, I'm Peter Hitchener. Federal Treasurer Peter Costello has kicked off the government's campaign for tax reform. He says Australians could wait up to 2 years for tax cuts, but has not said how they'll be funded.
Tax reform was the big issue at the government's Thredbo retreat, the Prime Minister holding a quick meeting with the Treasurer before the party room discussion. Mr Costello announcing on the Nine Network Sunday program the first stage of the government's tax reform campaign.
Which is a booklet that we prepared about the need for reform of the Australian taxation system. We're going to be distributing it through bookshops all over Australia.
Mr Costello believes the brochure mounts the case for sweeping changes, a launching pad for the government's plans for a goods and services tax, an overhaul of business tax and income tax cuts. One stumbling block, Labor's opposition to a GST. Shadow Treasurer Gareth Evans claims the government intends to levy a 10% tax on all goods and services.
Collect a large bundle of money by making people pay tax on everything they buy and using the proceeds of that to offer some income tax bribe.
But the push for reform has won overwhelming support from the coalition party room endorsing the tax campaign. And there was another sign the government is gearing up for an early election. Liberal Party Director Linton Crosby briefing backbenchers on strategies for marginal seats. Flo Bitcon, National 9 News, Thredbo.
The federal government's decision to commit troops to an American attack on Iraq has been strongly supported by voters, according to the latest opinion poll. It shows that 64% of Australians are in favour of military involvement, more than twice the number of those who disapprove. Meanwhile, China has joined the major powers putting pressure on the United States not to attack Iraq and step up attempts to find a diplomatic solution to the crisis.
Support for American strikes is not unanimous, even in the West. 9 people were arrested at this anti-war protest in London. For the United States, another awkward moment in diplomacy. This time, Chinese officials lectured US Ambassador to the UN, Bill Richardson, stressing a bombing raid on Iraq would kill innocent civilians without solving the weapons crisis. Saddam continues to try and win support from his Arab neighbours. He's just released hundreds of Arab prisoners from Iraqi jails. The move might be paying off. Saddam T-shirts are selling out to Palestinians in Gaza, and the Gulf nation of Qatar flew a plane load of food and medicine into Baghdad. Many Arabs may not like Saddam, but they are sympathetic to the Iraqi people. That's not the case in Kuwait, where they are bracing for a possible repercussion if the US coalition attacks. Pressure is now mounting on UN Secretary-General Kofi Annan to make a personal peace mission to Baghdad. But as the military build-up continues in the Gulf, the time for diplomacy seems to be running out. Mark Burrows, National 9 News, Amman, Jordan.
Controversial black Muslim leader Louis Farrakhan has hit out at the Australian government for its treatment of Aborigines. The 64-year-old American today toured Aboriginal areas in the notorious inner Sydney suburb of Redfern, meeting the residents and promising to tell the world of their plight. His message to the locals was to stay away from alcohol and drugs. Farrakhan later called on the federal government to put an end to the suffering of the Aboriginal people. Rioting mobs in Indonesia have continued their rampage across West Java in protest against rising food prices. They've turned on prosperous ethnic Chinese, who they blame for the country's financial chaos, and looted and set fire to their homes, shops and temples. Police were powerless to stop the rampage and could only stand by and watch. At least 3 people have so far been killed in the rioting. To the north in Borneo, fires have destroyed crops and threatened to sweep through small settlements on the edge of the island's huge forests. Some communities are also suffering from drought as the poisonous haze which blanketed Southeast Asia last year forms again. Logging and plantation companies are being blamed for what's being described as an environmental catastrophe. A Melbourne racing car driver has survived a terrifying crash, escaping with just a black eye. In front of a packed house for Calder Park's 10th birthday last night, Graham O'Brien was travelling at 230 kilometres an hour when he was sent tumbling out of control. Rescue teams were amazed when he emerged from the wreckage virtually unscathed. Victoria's Bradley Hughes created history with his win in the Australian Masters at Huntingdale in Melbourne today. Hughes' final round of 67 pushed him to a tournament record of 24 under par, beating Greg Norman's previous record of 19 under. Tasmania's Matthew Goggin finished 5 shots behind in second place. A brief look at the national weather now. Fine in Perth, cloudy periods for Adelaide, showers clearing from Melbourne, possible thunderstorms in Sydney, showers and a storm for Brisbane and a late storm in Darwin. That's the news for now. Good night.
This has been a National 9 News presentation. They're in the